Multilinguals of Reddit. What's the best thing you've accidentally overheard in public in another language? A bunch of things from when I studied abroad in Japan. Not necessarily best things, but more like lessons in being polite, even when you think people can't understand you. Story number 1. I'm fluent enough in Japanese, so I knew when people were talking about me. Usually people just stare at you when they notice you're a foreigner, but some people do talk. This one couple saw me, sat across from me on the bus. This was in a residential area, not a tourist spot, and started complaining about how, what, tourists will be bringing their loud American friends around now. I let this go for about 5 minutes before getting sick of it and saying, "Are you sure you want to be talking about this in front of me? Because it's kind of rude, so please stop." And I think it scared the shit out of them. Some chick towards the back of the bus started cracking up. That said, many of the other American students in the same program as me were always loudish on public transportation. Story number 2. I had a bunch of guy friends who would rate Japanese girls on the subway in English. She's a 10. She's a 7. Anyway, I was pretty much expecting this to happen eventually, but one day while we were commuting into downtown Nagoya, a girl turned around, looked my guy friend in the eye and said, "I'm from New York, you effing a-hole." After high school, I took a solo trip to Europe before starting college. I was in Amsterdam, sitting alone at a restaurant, when I hear Hebrew, my native tongue, though I live in the US. A couple of people at the next table who I notice are looking in my direction, saying it must really suck, eating at a restaurant alone. I responded in Hebrew saying it's actually alright, I've got a book so I'm good. We ended up joining tables, and spent the next day hanging out in the city. Heard some girls in a bathroom discussing in detail my supposed personal hygiene, like how those people don't even wipe, etc. As I was meticulously washing my hands, I let it go until one girl goes, "Careful, she might understand Arabic." The main B goes, "No way we would know something that's not her native language." Without even turning around or looking at them, I dry my hands, go, "You sure?" in Arabic and walk off, savoring the looks of disbelief in the mirror. I came to the US when I was 9 years old with my parents from the former USSR, and hence speak fluent Russian. However, you would never know from speaking to me since my accent is practically non-existent, thanks in part to my being so young when we moved. When I was 17, I got my first official job as a cashier at ShopRite. For those not on the east coast of the US, ShopRite is a supermarket chain here, so it's a particularly non-eventful day of normal cashier work. People get on my line, I scan their I bag their I tell them how much money they spent, and they give me money to stuff the register. At some point this Russian woman and her 20-ish-year-old son get in my lane. I finish ringing up the customer before them and the following conversation ensues. Me, to previous customer, "Have a nice day." Me, to Russian woman, "Do you have a ShopRite card?" Woman, "No." Me, "Do you have any coupons or rain checks?" Woman, "No." I then begin scanning her groceries. Note that as far as she's concerned, it has been established that I speak flawless English. Woman, to her son. Translation: "Look at what this idiot is doing." I glance up trying to find the idiot she is talking about. Perhaps something funny is going on. Woman. Translation: "Why is he even working here? God, I hate idiots." At this point I realize she is talking about me. Mind you, all I am doing at this point is taking her groceries, waving them over the scanner, and putting them aside to bag later. I'm not banging them or taking a long time or anything. I was doing a pretty decent job of it actually. I begin to run the situation in my head and decide that it's best to just continue working and ignore the woman for now. So I put on my best smile and keep scanning her woman. Translation: "How long is this going to take?" I finish ringing up all her stuff, punch up her total and begin bagging. Normally I would have asked how she would like to pay at this point, but I decided I would let her throw in a few more insults first. Woman. Translation: "He doesn't even know how to pack correctly." Oh, what an idiot. She managed to throw in a few more insults my way, calling me some very colorful things in Russian. I made sure to pack all of her things away with a smile, and then replied, "Me." Translation: "How will you be paying for this?" The woman stops dead in her tracks. Her eyes open wide in a moment of horror, and for a brief moment our eyes lock. I smile an even bigger smile, as gentle as I can possibly muster, under the circumstances. Her son even took a step back, after what must have felt like an eternity for her. She hung her head in shame and handed me her credit card. I rang her up, handed her the credit card back, and handed her son the remaining groceries. Both of them are completely red in the face at this point and both refuse to say anything. Their eyes are firmly locked onto the floor. As they leave, I smile at them again and say, me. Translation: thank you very much. Please come again. Now the cherry on the icing happened almost 6 months after the incident. The son happened to get on my line with whom I assume was his father. They were speaking Russian to each other and didn't pay much attention to me, but I recognized the son. After I was done scanning their things, I pause, put on my smile again and say to the son, me. Translation: I remember you. How are you doing? The best part wasn't the son's look of terror when he realized I was the same cashier that caught his mother being an a-hole. It was the same look on the father's face, and the subsequent look of shame and insistence on looking at his shoes and not speaking. Obviously the story of his wife's antics reached his ears at some point, and they all remembered even 6 months after the fact. That is an awesome story. I understand Russian too, and I sometimes overhear people talking about me on the train, even on the queue when it's passing through Brooklyn, when people really ought to know better. My favorite story though was on a bus from JFK. I can't listen to people and not look at them at the same time. So when I am listening to strangers converse, it's fairly obvious. Fairly quickly, 2 pilots were having a conversation in Russian right across the aisle, and I must have been gawping more than usual, because one of them started periodically glancing at me, looking puzzled. Finally, he stopped talking to his companion, turned to face me straight on, and told a joke. I couldn't help it. It was funny, so I laughed. He points at me with this triumphant look on his face going gotcha. Then he told jokes for the rest of the ride. Overheard a bunch of French tourists in Nepal discussing, in graphic detail, the diarrhea they'd been having for a few days. After a while they turned to me and my friends and asked, in English, where we are from. My friends answered, in French, we're from the same place you are. And he, me,'s from Quebec. Their look of embarrassment was just delectable. The awkwardness was palpable. I lived in China, and being blonde and white, people don't think I can understand Mandarin. I was walking into a coffee shop in Shanghai and I saw 2 old women look at me. They stared for a moment and said, he has such a nice butt. It was hard not to laugh. My mom works with a man from the Dominican Republic. He was helping 2 Spanish-speaking girls at his job. They were speaking in Spanish, thinking my mom's co-worker could not understand since he looks black. He fully understood their compliments about how helpful he was. That ended much better than I expected. I understand ASA, sign language. I was watching 2 older women using ASA to have a conversation. These women were at least in their 60s. They were talking about the fact that one of the 2 ladies was seeing a new guy named Ray and talking about their last date and all. The one seeing Ray eventually said, all Ray wants is a piece of my PSY pie. The other one signed back, Hazel, you better not say PSY pie. There's a lot of people who know sign language and one might see. Half white, half Chinese here, but people usually can't place me. I've gotten Mexican, Greek, white, and a few others over the years. Lived in Taiwan for a few years and learned to speak Mandarin Chinese fluently. My parents taught at an all-girls high school. Imagine 8,000 plus schoolgirls in uniform. No guys around except the teachers and me, who was the same age as them. They would always assume I was a foreigner that didn't speak Chinese and talk about me. Fortunately for me, a very large percentage of them thought I was attractive and would yap away in Chinese right in front of me about this. I'd never let on. Just pretend to notice them and smile and start conversing with them in English. All students had to take English class, so all had some proficiency. As a result, it was enormously easy to date as many cute Chinese girls as I could find the time for. I know a couple of Mexican men living in Vancouver. They went to a takeout sushi restaurant to pick up some food for supper. They were served by a very cute Japanese girl working the counter. They started talking about her in Spanish, with a focus on particular body parts and their attributes. When she handed them their order, she gave them the price in Spanish. Her parents were Japanese, but she was born and raised in Peru. I have a co-worker who speaks French, and sometimes will sing or talk to himself. Everyone likes him and it doesn't bother anyone. One day I was working in the same room as him training some people when I heard him singing. I usually don't pay any attention, but this time I did. He was singing a really obscene song about having sex with cows. I stopped what I was doing and gave him a really weird look. Then we both started laughing. Really freaked out the trainees. So my mom is Norwegian. My brother and I were raised in the US speaking Norwegian and English in the home. One summer our family were visiting relatives in Norway and were browsing a little shop. I love the little shop. In a very small village. We happened to be speaking English with one another at the time. My mom noticed, and got great pleasure from, hearing the two shopkeepers freaking out about having to speak English to us. They were late teens, early 20s and were likely very proficient in English, but nervous about having to use it on some American tourists. Short straw shopkeeper approaches us, very red-faced. "Good afternoon. May I please help you find anything in our store?" My mom, in Norwegian, "We're quite alright. Thank you. Oh thank God," and other flustered mutterings. It was very cute. Knowing a less spoken language like Hebrew affords me some funny situations with Israelis in the US who think that nobody understands them. I was helping out with freshmen move in at my school, and caught a mother and daughter off guard when they were complaining about the heat and the smell in the dorm, and I responded over my shoulder in an attempted native accent that it gets nicer once all the parents leave. The mother wasn't amused. I studied German in college and can understand it pretty well. I've never overheard any conversations, but I did make a fool of myself when I went to see Hellboy 2 with some of my family. There was one scene that ended with a character singing a very slightly suggestive song in German, which wasn't subtitled. This came right after a slapstick sequence that had the whole theater laughing, and so it took me a moment, and my sister elbowing me in the ribs, to notice that I was the only one laughing at the German joke. I was on the Brussels tram and these two Texan girls, they kept talking about Texas, were being really loud, and in the end, one said to the other, "I wonder if any of these people can understand us," and a guy getting off the tram said, "We all can. We all speak English." Bizarrely, I hear a lot of Chinese people in China talk sh about my girlfriend. I'm Chinese and she's white, as if I can't understand it, even if it's in the dialect, although I usually just yell at them a little bit and I don't think they're embarrassed. Not me, but my boyfriend is Cuban but looks like a gringo. Read, white skin, red beard, pale hair, and him and his best friend had been backpacking in Spain. They got on an elevator in a hotel at their next stop and were chatting to each other in English, and these women who got on kind of turned up their nose at them and then started going on and on in Spanish about stupid American tourists. So my boyfriend looked at them and in perfect Spanish said something along the lines of, "Excuse me, but do you have some sort of problem with me?" He said the woman was so embarrassed that he spoke Spanish she couldn't even look him in the eye and got off on the next floor.